Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to take another look at our HTML elements, and specifically, we are going to take a look at the semantic element footer. This video is part of a larger series of videos that focuses on HTML, and this particular series of videos is going to be focusing on what I'm calling the intermediate HTML. In other words, the things that you might not necessarily do in the simple HTML page. So this video assumes that you've already went through some of the earlier videos involving the paragraph and the text, different types of text tags, and so on. And specifically, this video assumes that you have had the discussion about the structure and sort of the layout of the page, a more sophisticated structure, not just a basic HTML page. And in this case, what we're going to do is look at the purpose behind the footer. Now, we're not going to do a ton of coding in this video. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to set up a very simple snippet here, following along with our W3 Schools page. But again, I'm going back to the semantic elements and focusing on the fact that this particular element, much like the header element that we saw earlier, doesn't really affect how the page is viewed by the user. In other words, basically what you can do is both use it in conjunction with cascading style sheets, but also use it to put in information that can be then parsed by some other tool, perhaps an app, or leveraged in using some sort of style or even some sort of functionality, as we'll see when we start looking at our JavaScript. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and use an example or create an example of a footer. And you'll notice here that I have the W3 Schools HTML footer tag documentation already open. And so we're not going to deviate too much from this particular example. I am going to go back over to Visual Studio, and I am going to go ahead and create another page here. So we're going to go ahead and go with a new HTML page. And again, much like in the earlier examples, I'm going to keep this one pretty simple. I'm just going to go ahead and call this one footer underscore 1.html. And as far as the body goes, nothing too terribly interesting here. This is just going to be our H1 tag, and I'm going to call this footer example or something like that. Again, just so that you have some documentation about the various examples that you're going to be doing. And again, I'm going to throw in a p tag here, an example of using a footer. Now, obviously, this is just regular HTML, nothing fancy here, but we do want to make sure that this page is actually working. So I'm going to go ahead and call it footer underscore 01. We'll probably come back and do another one of these in a later video. And then we can just simply look at it inside of our favorite web browser. So there we go. We have a footer. And so now the idea here is, can we actually make it into a footer? In other words, can we put some useful information in the footer? This right now is just in the body. So I misspoke just a second ago. This is not really a footer. This is just some text that we have inside of the body for us to be able to follow up with. And then what we want to do is we want to take a look at the footer tag, the footer element. And again, much like with the other tags, they have the open and closing footer tag. And then what we're going to do is we're going to again follow along with a example from the W3 Schools. I'm just going to throw in something like contact us. You could use, for instance, an address tag. In this particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw in a tag. Let's go ahead and turn this into a mail to, and then gmyers at uab.edu. And then I'm just going to go ahead and put, again, gmyers at uab.edu. And hopefully I don't have any syntax issues here. I'm going to save this. And then we're going to go back out here and we're simply going to refresh this. And you'll notice that there it pops up. Obviously, you would probably want to do this a little bit differently. But if I were to click on this, it theoretically should launch your favorite email client, and there we go. So everything seems to be wired up correctly. Encourage you to remind yourself of how to throw in a subject and so on. So again, there's nothing really that complicated about using a footer. So you don't want to lose sight of the purpose behind a footer. Yes, could you have buried all this into a p tag inside of the body? Sure. But the idea then is that you can then style this by using a combination of an ID or a class or just simply use the element itself in your filtering in the cascading style sheets. But also then you can parse the HTML automatically using regular expressions to be able to pull out all of that footer information, which kind of should lead you down the road of concern, because that means that basically if somebody's can get access to your web page, they can just simply pull off all of your contact information, which may or may not be a bad thing. Now, the last thing that I want to show off in this particular video is going back to the HTML footer tag page. This part of the video may not age real well because, again, a lot of these websites, they change their formatting, they change their templating system over the years. And so again, this particular comment probably won't age very well, but I thought just out of curiosity, I'd see what some of our favorite web pages use with respect to the footer tags. And so if you scroll down here all the way to the bottom, you'll see that what looks like this footer, and it's going to act like a footer. And they use this across the W3 Schools website pretty often. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, I'm going to go to inspect, and of course you can view page source as well. And I just thought this was kind of interesting. I kind of got a little bit of a laugh out of this because this references back to one of the earlier videos in this series, in that we didn't always use these footer elements. We actually didn't always have access to these footer elements. And so another common way of going about doing this is with a div tag with a specific ID. And again, this is perfectly fine. It's relatively normal. It's just not as consistent across websites, meaning that if you were to use the div tag, you would have to use an ID associated with it or a class associated with it. And if you were trying to automatically parse a bunch of different websites, having that div tag and not knowing what it's related to kind of impacts your ability to automatically pull the information. And hence, if you knew or could find the page had a footer information in it, then you could just simply pull that using regular expressions. So again, either approach is perfectly fine. I just thought this was kind of amusing that the W3 Schools does not use the footer element, which again, not all websites use it. But I thought, all right, let's go to another one of our favorite websites, in this case, so Wikipedia. Let's do the same thing. And so what I did is I came down here to the bottom of the Wikipedia page, and I simply, again, just right clicked and I went to view, not view page source. We can do it that way, but right click and go to inspect. Sorry, my finger slipped off my mouse button there, and you can see that sure enough, there you go. So in other words, Wikipedia chose in their template for all of the Wikipedia pages to simply use the footer element. And so as a result, any Wikipedia page that you automatically parse with a script or an executable or an app, you can know that you can pull the footer information from it. And again, why might you want to do that? Well, if you take a good close look in the footer information, you can see that this page was last edited on, and in this case, 23rd of June, 2026. And so you can imagine now you can automatically pull the page information, or at least the last edited information from a page automatically by simply knowing that it's buried inside of the footer element. So again, this part of the video may not age super well just because of the fact that technology is going to evolve. These templates that these major websites are using are going to evolve over the years. And so 6 months from now, they may choose a different approach, or who knows, 6 years from now, they could still be doing the exact same thing. But back to the footer. The footer is just a great way of encapsulating some standard information such as the authorship, the copyright, and so on about a page. One other interesting use for it that you can do if you want to is a sitemap, although we're going to talk a little bit about how to put that in the navigation bar as well. You can sort of mix the two a little bit depending on what you're trying to accomplish. And then also the back to top links. That's pretty common, particularly when you have a really, really long web page, to provide the user with some way to essentially jump up to the top of the page or possibly somewhere else in the page. It's just convenience. So again, there's some additional reasons to use a footer. The most common one, of course, is just some sort of contact information or authorship information. So hopefully you found this video useful. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and thank you for watching.